Teacher says to class, draw whatever you want. When they're done, the teacher asks them what they've drawn. Class says, dinosaurs, hearts, superheroes, anything, doesn't matter. Then one child says, I drew God. So the teacher says, that's very nice, but no one knows what God looks like. The child without hesitation says, yeah, until now. I am Mike, joined here by Johnny in the Comics Corner, and we are talking about Mr. Miracle.
That was pretty cryptic what you read, to be honest.
Exactly, yeah. Well, it better be because, get used to it, because that was right at the top of the book here, so.
Yeah, and I think it gets repeated a few times throughout. If I'm not wrong.
Yeah. We'll definitely get into that as we go through with our kind of a recap and review of it. But yeah, that's it definitely sets the mood for this book. So for those who don't know, Mr. Miracle came out in 2017. It was a 12-part issue series that ended in, I think it was late 2018, maybe early 2019, I forget. But it was written by Tom King and Mitch Gerads. If I might be pronouncing that incorrectly, but yeah, I don't know about you, Johnny, but I didn't really have too much information about this book in particular. Going into it, I had always heard great stuff. Between the writing, I was always a fan of the arts. Like, I was working at Pastimes at this time, so like I'd see kind of like the issues trickling in here and there. So like I'd be like, oh, that's a cool art. I could flip it open and look around. But never actually read it myself. And also didn't really know much about the character of Mr. Miracle beforehand too.
Yeah, okay. If last week we were confused about Transformers, wow.
Yeah. I mean,
that made so much sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Back when it was a simpler time. Robots, hey, maybe sometimes they were a car, but at the end of the day, you knew what you were dealing with. Whereas this, definitely a lot more like philosophical, and it's weird. Like I feel like the kind of quick little elevator pitch for it is almost like a slice of life of superheroes, kind of mashed up with like like the horrors of war in some regards. I mean, especially in like the later chapters, but it is kind of a weird mix that happens.
Yeah, there was a lot going on. I mean, I feel weird saying this about a book, but it was like overwhelming. And it really was. Like,
but we had read Watchmen. We should be able to handle anything.
Yeah, right. But like, I don't know, man. Like a lot of the images were like really distorted and unclear.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's going on? And something I noticed, I'm trying to think if it was throughout or just at certain points, but like a lot of the word bubbles didn't have the little like connector to their mouth, which sounds like a weird complaint, but it was like, I kind of had to sometimes be like, wait, who's talking? And
yes. Sometimes, there was like, it was used for like narrative purposes or,
right.
Spoiler alerts, Darkseid is in this. We'll get into that, but I know like, it's, when he was talking, it was weird. I kind of almost pictured it as it was like being projected into Mr. Miracle's mind, or it was like such an all booming, like a voice of God, basically, that like he didn't necessarily need a voice bubble like tail connecting to him. But yeah, like there's definitely a lot of, like you'd mentioned, kind of outside of the box, almost artistic liberties with the just almost like the syntax and the setup of a comic. Like the way that we know. Like it's funny talking about like Watchmen. Like that one was very much. It was a 3x3 grid of nine cells. Like very rarely would they change that. Whereas like this one, it's like splash pages. Like like they go off the there's grid. Sometimes there's not. Like it's all over the place. Sometimes like they bleed into one another. So it's almost it adds, I think, a lot to the kind of madness and confusion in some parts of the of the story. So they definitely use almost just the medium of comics itself to kind of help tell that story.
Yeah, it actually reminded me of another book that I haven't read, but I've paged through a number of times. Arkham Asylum, the Grant Morrison Batman story.
Yeah. That.
Where like the artwork is just crazy and distorted and stuff like that. That's kind of what this reminded me.
Yeah, I was definitely a fan of the art. Like again, like not going into this not knowing that much about the character. Like the story would have to take some time to put its hooks in me, but the art, like right away, like I definitely dug the style that was going on there, and especially because like it does change quite a bit, and like you said, there's like the weird kind of like glitchy effects and stuff that happens that definitely make you kind of question what all is going on there. We'll get into that later, but I was kind of hoping it would lead to a little bit more, but I feel like the ending, maybe it's just me, kind of like let me down, but again, I think I was maybe expecting it to go a different route with some of it, but yeah, there's like one of the motifs is almost his own kind of sanity in some ways. Mr. Miracle, aka Scott Free. But yeah, I think maybe we should start here at the start at issue 1. And right at the gate, we get basically a recap because, again, I assume most people, especially who had picked this book up, might not be familiar with Mr. Miracle, or let alone like any of the new and old gods, all the kind of classic Jack Kirby, our boy back at it again, Jack Kirby, doing some DC this time.
Actually, I've heard so much about like Jack Kirby's Fourth World, New Gods. I didn't know Old Gods was a thing.
Yeah.
I've never even like researched any of that, let alone read it. Never knew anything about Mr. Miracle. I didn't even know he was connected to the New Gods until we started reading this.
Yeah. Like I definitely known, and we even have some Mr. Miracle comics here at the store, and I had definitely seen them before, but I didn't know that he was so vitally connected to the whole like overarching story of that. So that was definitely new to me.
So I guess like we would need to ask somebody, I think, like, would knowing all of that other stuff first help the story?
I definitely feel like that might be the case. because
Yeah.
for me at least, like like I was picking up a lot of like there's a lot of characters obviously that are referenced, events, small stuff like that, where I would assume that if you knew them, like even just kind of background characters, references to other new and old gods alike. So I'm sure that that was something to kind of add to it, but I don't think that there was anything vital that we missed, or
Okay.
maybe it just all completely went over our heads.
Yeah, I don't know. Before we really get into it,
Yeah.
if you had to rank this like out of 5 stars, what do you give it for yourself?
So I definitely dug the art. So the art is definitely up there. I'd say like maybe a 4 for that, like that. The story wise, I don't know. Like I feel like that would definitely go between like a 3 or a 4. Like I didn't absolutely like love it. Like the dialogue was interesting at times, but uh, like I said, I guess I didn't know what to expect going into it. That it would basically be mostly just kind of like almost like a slice of life of almost just the overarching story of, hey, what happens when two superheroes have a kid, you know?
Right. And so is to you, in your opinion, is that what the whole concept of it was? Is that
I mean, there was definitely more to it than that. Like it was about, like I said, it definitely goes into philosophy, talking about God, the face of God, whether you should or shouldn't know the face of God is something that's repeated a lot. Like you said, that quote that I had at the start, that anecdote about a child who drew the face of God, that's brought up multiple times. So there's definitely a lot that kind of goes on.
yeah. Um, for myself, man, I hate to like get this down on a book, but like
Oh man.
I give it like a 2 out of 5. And like, but here I'm gonna reserve some judgment and say
Okay.
that like if if there is more to gain out of it by reading older stuff, I'd be willing to like revisit it and
Sure.
evaluate later on. But like, yeah, it just didn't do it for me. It just didn't. I'd give it like a 2 out of 5. The artwork actually was a huge turnoff to
Oh
me,
really?
which I'm a little surprised because I'm not like a traditionalist where I need that 3x3.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, but like it was just something about how I keep using this word, but like how distorted it was. And I get it that was the point of it, but like I
Yeah.
just wasn't getting it. Like it was like too much for me, and it's so much philosophy in it. Like it's weird because it's on the surface it like didn't seem as deep as Watchmen because like the dialogue wasn't as heavy, the
Yeah.
word bubbles weren't as big. You could read through it relatively quick,
Yeah.
but it was like, what the hell did I just read after like each issue? So, um, I'm not even sure if I understand it. So that's also playing into
Sure,
my
no,
opinion.
that's totally fine. Yeah, like we said, we did kind of go into
Yeah.
this one blind. Real quick, shout out to Matt in the Facebook chat. Hey there, Matt. Thanks for joining us today. For those who joined in late, we are talking about again Mr. Miracle, the 2017 Tom King miniseries, 12-issue series. Yeah, I definitely do agree that pretentious makes it sound bad, but like there definitely was times like that where like again like when we get to the ending and like maybe what I was expecting or thought that like between the distortion and a lot of the kind of visual stuff that was happening, maybe I was kind of expecting it to go almost a weird like psychological, it was all in his head type stuff, because like there's a few moments that that happened that like almost hinted towards that, and then like when I got to like that last issue, I'm like, oh, I guess that wasn't the case, or like I guess it was kind of a little more straightforward than I thought. But again,
Right.
maybe that was me just kind of almost hoping that it would go that way. And yeah, Matt, don't worry. As always, we're gonna do like a quick little recap. Well, not necessarily quick, but are more of a recap of the issues, if you haven't actually read it or if it's been a while, because we'll usually kind of break down what happened and kind of what we took away from it, what we liked, what we didn't like, and stuff like that. So, again, I guess from the start here, issue 1 more or less opens with a TV show presented by the funky Flashman himself, and he was giving basically a recap of the events of the old and new gods, the Jack Kirby characters and story arcs. So he talks about how the death of the old gods created 2 planets, New Genesis and Apocalypse. Basically almost heaven and hell stand-ins. Like New Genesis is this idyllic utopia, like all these like soaring gold like buildings and stuff like that, people with like like wings and very like Roman like toga dress. Like like it's definitely what you'd picture as an idyllic area. And then Apocalypse is this kind of blasted like wasteland of volcanoes and like just a hellscape.
It's basically Mustafar from Star Wars. That's what I kept.
Exactly, yeah. For all of our Star Wars fans out there, yeah. Exactly, yeah. On New Genesis, the New Gods rule, and they are basically governed by Highfather, who is like the Zeus, whatever you want to refer to him as. He is the kind of leader of this order-driven society. And on Apocalypse, we have Darkseid, who is all about destroying people's hope, and in doing so, he's looking to use the anti-life equation to do that. So those are kind of his gains. We've got the heaven and hell planets, and they're kind of perpetually at war. So,
I was really excited actually once I realized Darkseid was going to be a part of this, because I'm familiar with the character, but I've never read anything with him because I'm not a Superman fan. I think he's mostly a Superman villain.
Yeah, because it's usually like he's the only one that can even like withstand fighting Darkseid. But so he's kind of like he's almost the Thanos in some ways of this, and especially like a small thing, but like even the way that he stands, like usually it's like his hands behind his back, like chest puffed out. Like I don't know, that's very much a power stance that I would usually kind of equate with Thanos, and then just like every time we see Darkseid, he's always doing that. I don't know, I absolutely love it. So
I'm pretty sure DC was trying to.
I don't know who came first. I was gonna say I think it was probably Darkseid first. But in my knowledge, I just know it from Thanos. But yeah, again, seeing that made me kind of almost instantly latch onto and enjoy the character. So.
Yeah, and but yeah, I was happy that he was gonna be in here, so I finally got a taste of reading what Darkseid is like. Yeah. So that was cool.
But yeah, going on, we've got so again, the New Gods and the denizens of Apocalypse are kind of in this perpetual war. It's the bloodshed is in the billions at this point. It's been going on for I think 1,000 years, and at some point, Highfather and Darkseid are like, we can't keep doing this. This is enough, and they tried to come to a truce. And in doing so, their plan is to basically swap their firstborn male children with each other, and at that point, Highfather gives up his child and gives him to Apocalypse, and Apocalypse gives up his son and gives him to Highfather. And in doing so, they're kind of almost in the same way like in the olden days, people would warring kingdoms would like have a marriage that kind of unifies the kingdoms. They're in kind of hoping that in doing so, there's some loose tie to one another, and it'll kind of put a ceasefire on. So Darkseid's son Orion is raised by Highfather, and he's raised in a loving, nurturing New Genesis. Like he's well educated. He's kind of taken care of, but not like kind of pampered. Like he's just given a very idyllic lifestyle for him, and like a loving environment. Whereas on the other hand, scot-free, Highfather's child is given off to Darkseid, but he's not really the one that raises him. It's Granny Goodness is the one that raises him in the X pits, which is kind of this, just almost like an area of torture. Like he's perpetually like locked up, malnourished, like mistreated. He's constantly trying to escape, and in doing so, Granny Goodness starts calling him scot-free as a mocking way to, like say he's trying to, escape out of here and, get off scot-free. And for the longest time, it never works. He always ends up back in the same kind of chamber, trying to crawl out of there to, like just more endless torture.
Yeah, and, we find out later on that, like, his wife Barda was also raised there, and I'm not trying to jump around too much, but like hearing how like torturous it was, and then like later in the story when he's trying to justify like, well, we went through that, but we made it out okay.
Yeah.
Like going back and kind of rehashing over what he was going through, it's like, dude, you messed up way at what you were going through.
Yeah.
And like,
yeah, they were definitely kind of conjoined over that shared trauma. Yeah.
But like, what was the point of torturing this child forever, and then like why Orion get this treat? I don't know. It's just.
I mean, yeah, like that was the thing is, like the son of God is being raised by the devil and vice versa. So like, of course, whoever has to live in hell is going to, be subject to that torture for, it seems like about like, 20 or 30ish years. Like, he eventually does, he does meet Big Barda, who was this female warrior, that was like raised in those same X pits. And he's able to finally escape at one time. And he kind of takes her, and they go to Earth and escape there. And he finds a life as basically a sideshow in the circus, and he meets the fantastic Mr. Miracle, who is he's an escape artist, and his friend Oberon, who's I think just kind of like the almost like a manager. It seems like he's just kind of there taking care of them. And at some point, Mr. Miracle's I think they said it was like almost underworld, or like there was some kind of like shady characters who eventually wanted him dead. They don't really go into that much into it, and we don't really have the knowledge of that. But he's eventually killed, and in doing so, scot-free takes up the mantle of Mr. Miracle and becomes kind of the world's greatest escape artist. And one of the things too that we see there too, he marries Big Barda. Yes, Johnny? Oh. Are you there? It might be lagging a little bit here.
Glitching on me. You keep pausing every few seconds, and I'm missing everything you're saying.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, on your end, too, it looked like it was kind of freezing up a bit, too.
Okay, now you're fine.
Okay, yeah.
Am I good?
Yeah, it might be just internet kind of being wonky for a bit here. But yeah, okay, so I was saying that basically, the way that this little funky Flashman like TV introduction ends up is scot-free takes up the mantle of Mr. Miracle with Oberon and Big Barda, and in theory they're kind of living happily ever after when that ends. They're married, they're living on Earth, but we do kind of, that's where like a lot of the glitch stuff starts coming in, and we start hearing more about this quote of Darkseid is, and seeing like this black screen that comes up, and a lot of just kind of underlying unrest about what their future holds for them.
Yeah, and obviously without any previous knowledge, that Darkseid is thing was kind of confusing, and
Yeah.
even after I understand it, is that just like he's hearing that in his head? It's like what?
I think it was something that was almost kind of like beaten into him, because he does mention later on that like when he thinks about it, he's like, like, what does that even mean? Like, did people probably just said it just because it sounded cool? So it's definitely like, I feel like a quote that happened a lot. It was in reference to I think it was a Grant Morrison run of Justice League, in which he refers to where Darkseid asks the question of like, who is the god of like all things, and he responds, Darkseid is. So like Darkseid is also, it's almost very biblical too, of using gods where I'm sure my Bible studies teacher is upset at the fact that I can't recall it right now, but in the Bible, like when it was referred to, God refers to himself as I am. When who is it? So it's stuff like that too, where it's like, like Darkseid is all things in some ways, like he just is, and also is just kind of eternal, and in Thanos terms almost too eventual, like that no matter what happens, like Darkseid will kind of have his way, and Darkseid is. So that's definitely a quote that especially in the early issues, as we talk about like the kind of comics grid of like the 9x9, like almost every page for like the first chapter or two had like one of those panels, if not multiple, was just all black, and then white text, Darkseid is. So it's definitely very ominous, and again, like I said, was foreshadowing stuff that I thought might be eventually happening, but didn't really happen. But
and also, did you notice the guy Flash or Flashy?
Yeah, Funky Flashman.
Definitely Stan Lee.
Oh yeah. Like that's the thing is, I meant to check into that like a little bit more, but like as it goes on, like loosely his looks kind of to some degree was like the younger Stan Lee, like although he looks a lot more hipstery in this with like the full beard and haircut, but yeah, he refers to he says Excelsior or a lot. Later on, we get a very thinly veiled allusion to Silver Surfer and Galactus. Like they come up with a new comic series that is basically that, which was funny too, because also like we're dealing with Jack Kirby characters between New Gods and then also Silver Surfer. So that was interesting to
Right.
see. But yeah, he is very much a Stan Lee style character. So
There was even I don't know if you caught this, but like eventually when Scott has his kid and his name is Jacob, he calls him like Jumpin' Jake, which
yeah,
is like
exactly. Yeah, he does very
with Smiling Stan, and then it was like
exactly. He does
Jack
very
Kicker.
yeah alliterative names of like the same letters
Yeah.
starting off like each one, which is I'm like, all right, I see what you're doing here. I appreciate it.
Right. So I thought that was a nice ode to him,
Yeah.
especially because well documented that him and Kirby didn't have the best relationship. So to
Yeah.
have this book that's like based
It-
off Kirby's characters, but like has this like hint of Stan Lee, I like that aspect of
Definitely, yeah.
it. Weirdly.
But yeah, so then, like you said, that that kind of intro ends, and then we have Mr. Miracle in the bathroom. We see he's bleeding. We kind of start him with like a zoom in on his face, and it pulls out, and we see that he's just kind of slumped over in the bathroom. We don't really know what happened. He's rushed off to the hospital, where we find out that it was basically a suicide attempt. He had slit his wrist in his own bathroom. Big Barda had found him and rushed him off to the hospital, where he's there for a few days. Apparently the Justice League had like sent well wishes, like they called the house, like Superman apparently visits the house to see if everything's okay. But yeah, like, and then from there, like, he goes right onto he gets a visit to not only from the Justice League but also from his brother Orion, which was the first time that we actually kind of see him, and he is definitely a formidable character. He comes in and he, I guess, upon hearing this news of like his brother tried to kill himself, he doesn't really take it that well, so he just basically starts assaulting him. He's attacking him, punching him, knocking him down, and all he says in response basically is just stand up, like just so he could punch him again, and that goes on until he's kind of eventually beaten up and told off by Big Barda. But yeah, that was an interesting like character introduction.
It was. It's an interesting dynamic, and like, okay, again, I don't know if I'm just digging at something that shouldn't be dug at, but like, if they were swapped, why have they had so much interaction? Why are they brothers? Why do they have this rapport with one another? Like, you'd think they wouldn't have associated with each other. So I wish I knew more of that backstory.
Yeah.
But that's okay. And yeah, I right off the bat with the suicide attempt, I kind of like what you were saying a few minutes ago. Like, I was like, well, okay, is everything afterwards like a haze? Is it like, is he in limbo between life and death?
Yes.
Like, I was. Turns out, no, he tried to kill himself and did.
Exactly.
But I like couldn't grasp that for like quite a few issues. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because and then they mentioned that too, because he's on this talk show after Orion visits, he goes onto a talk show with it's Late Night with Godfrey, in which he's kind of almost doing like a press junket style of, because in this world he's still performing, and there's a few times throughout the story where he's like like doing a performance or getting ready for a performance, and he's just on the late night circuit, where he talks about the incident, saying that it was a trick, and that eventually he was doing it just because what greater escape than to be able to escape from death. So like that, he was kind of writing it off as that was his reason for doing it. Although then we do get like more kind of glitchy stuff and kind of a cryptic response from the host Godfrey, who says basically like,
yeah.
Did you like were you able to like what happened? And then like Mr. Miracle's like, excuse me, he tries to get it to it, and then it's brushed under the carpet of, oh, we've got to take a commercial break. So stuff like that was very much like almost like, was he imagining that? Because later on we start seeing hallucinations, and he talks about like seeing things, and in later scenes like he's seeing stuff that isn't really there. So like I couldn't really tell like, was that part of it, or did something happen where he like was that interview just kind of a hallucination for him basically? So
oh wow, I didn't even think of that, if it was a hallucination.
Yeah, like again, I couldn't really tell what to make of it, especially this early on into it. Like it was tough to tell like where they were going with it, but yeah, after that, the incident there, he gets a visit from his father, the High Father. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. There's a little bit of a delay.
Yeah.
But that line that the Godfrey says, like, that's what I was like, well, wait, why would you throw that? Why would Tom King throw that in there? It's got to mean that he's in limbo, and then it just didn't. So it seems like a throwaway line. after the fact.
Yeah, like at the start, yeah, like there's a lot of these almost like red herrings, or like, like again, maybe we were reading too much into it, but yeah, like these hints that something isn't really right, and like it brings up the motif and recurring thing of him trying to escape death, and like was he able to, like what happened. um, he gets a visit from Highfather, who says like he couldn't really be there sooner, because apparently war is kind of raging again, between New Genesis and Apocalypse, and Darkseid at this point has the anti-life equation, which we didn't really mention that much, but is apparently it is something that could basically even destroy hope within humanity. Like it's kind of the greatest weapon. They don't really mention like if it's an actual like physical equation that you have to write down, but it's more like the kind of almost symbolic, this symbolic weapon that could like dig within people, and basically make them lose all hope and all will to live. So it's like just shatters all life, like the name says. So it's interesting concept, but like one that like I've heard of before, but I didn't really know too much on. So, but they don't really go into it that in depth either. They just kind of mention it, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I had no idea what they were talking about at first, and yeah, apparently it's something that's referenced in other books, but without that knowledge, I couldn't really piece it together. So it's everything you just said, but is it a physical thing? Even by the end of the book, we don't really get that answer.
Yeah.
So a lot of questions left unanswered in this story.
And then after that visit, he gets a visit from another friendly or familiar face, Oberon, the cigar smoking, short. Like I said, he was kind of the friend of the original Mr. Miracle, like almost like a manager or fellow like sideshow kind of character. Is visiting at Mr. Miracle's apartment, and he kind of presents the story. He represents the story that I kind of quoted at the start of the child who had drawn the face of God. So we kind of get that motif there again. But Big Barda comes in, and she's a bit worried, because she had heard, she heard Scott talking to somebody there. Scott says like, "Oh, Oberon came by," to which she has to kind of remind him, "No, Oberon died like a month ago because of I think they mentioned it was like the cancer from the cigars or whatever they had smoked. So like he had buried Oberon and was at the funeral a month ago, but here he is, seeing him and talking to him again." So that was again like one of these things where like it felt like it's kind of leading into this kind of storyline that might not really be there, but we were seeing like a lot of these hallucinations and just random kind of deaths. So Johnny? Oh, the internet's being weird again. Ah, dang. But yeah, thanks again for everybody who's coming out so far. We are here talking about Mr. Miracle.
Yeah, dude, I'm like...
There we go. Yes. Oh no, I can only assume that it's the storm that's happening. I don't know if that's affecting either the internet or the connection. I don't know if you're getting it out by you. I can definitely hear it's sounding a little weird out there, but
yeah, I don't know. See, now it's clear. Are we?
I think so. Yeah, exactly.
It keeps like you keep pausing, and then no audio, and then it'll like quickly.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I'm seeing that on my end too. I think whoever's watching the stream, I apologize for any technical difficulties. I'm not sure what the deal is here, but we'll hopefully we'll bear with it, and keep going. But yeah, if you missed it, I was talking about the fact that Big Barda tells him Oberon was dead. Like so again a scene of Scott just kind of having this hallucination of talking with a friend who was at this point like months dead. So.
Well, and then that goes back to like my limbo thought. I was like, wait, are both these souls like caught in limbo, and that's why they're communicating? And I think it was a hallucination now after the fact, but that's kind of where my head was at.
And then there's one last one that happens too in this issue that again like was kind of a subtle one that definitely Christine in the chat says a lone tear every time Johnny's mic goes out. Exactly. Yeah, it's an RIP in the chat for our boys, for our connections. Yeah.
Appreciate you.
But yeah, as far as like the weird hallucination stuff, there's one last subtle one that kind of happens right at the end that again was my kind of lead off point into thinking that there was going to be something a lot deeper going on here, or a lot more like of these weird kind of hallucinations. Mr. Miracle is he's going with Big Barda to head back home for a bit on New Genesis. So they're taking a boom tube, which is kind of like this, like it's almost like a portal that connects New Genesis to Earth. So while they're waiting for that to come up there, they're just kind of talking amongst themselves. Scott is kind of voicing his concerns about, like the incident, death, the hallucinations that he's having. And he mentions that, in this point, we see that a close-up on Big Barda's face, where after Orion had come to the apartment, we see Big Barda close up in her eyes, and he mentions that she's got, oh, I thought you had like blue eyes, and she's like, no, my, you've got like big, beautiful blue eyes, and she's like, no, my eyes were always brown. But then we see at this close-up at the last panel of this issue, she has blue eyes. So something like that was very kind of a subtle kind of lead-in that had me thinking that there was going to be a lot more of these weird hallucinations and like Easter eggs almost throughout the series. But yeah, like we don't really see that again. Oh no, Johnny, a single tear at the mic. But again, here we are talking about Mr. Miracle, the 12-part series by John King. Thanks for everybody for coming out. Unfortunately, the internet's being a little wonky today, but hopefully it'll start playing nice. But yeah, so I think you heard.
Were you talking about the eye thing?
Yes, her eye color stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, I didn't have the wherewithal to go and look back. Are there any close-ups before that of her face that you can see her eye color?
Yeah. So I was mentioning that the first time that we see that when Orion came into the apartment and after like she beats him up, I think Scott makes an offhand comment about oh, you've got beautiful eyes, I thought they were blue. She's like, no, did Orion hit you that hard? And it's like, my eyes were always brown. And then at the end we see a close-up of her eyes and they're very blue. So.
Oh, so then what does that even mean? I don't even get it.
And also, it switches back and forth too throughout the series. So it goes from brown to blue in other close-ups too. So like these almost red herrings of thinking that that there was going to be more meaning to that, but not really. So I didn't really know what to make of it. So.
Yeah, as long as we're on the same page.
Exactly. Yeah, as long as we're both confused, that's all that matters.
Yeah, really. That's the first issue. That's kind of the cliffhanger.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Which again, he's heading home, and then like I said, like that weird kind of subtle thing I thought was gonna lead off to a lot of more just mysteries like that, but not really. Next one starts off, and we see Scott dressed up as Mr. Miracle at war on Apokolips, and he's kind of going around. He's a general in this war. He was called back by Orion to kind of help fight off the forces of Apokolips and Darkseid, because again they have the anti-life equation, so it basically means that they're going to war. He's being commanded by Orion, and we see just kind of a montage of him going from location to location, slaughtering different armies of dudes, and eventually he's called into the throne room of Orion, who is now at this point the new High Father of all of New Genesis. So there's kind of a struggle because Scott isn't really, he's not really willing to kind of kneel to him. He's not really willing to call him High Father, and it's kind of this brotherly struggle that's happening.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know if I should just.
I was gonna say this. This is almost fitting of all the glitches that we're having with the visual glitches and stuff that was happening. So maybe this is some meta level stuff that we're doing here. Yeah.
For real. So yeah, it's implied though that he didn't kill the High Father to take his role. He just took that role after the High Father died.
Yeah, right? I think High Father was killed by Darkseid or one of his generals at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I understood that right.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's where they go in together, him and Barda, and she kneels, and then he hesitates, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, basically Big Barda grabs him by the shoulder and kind of makes him kneel because he's just staring daggers at Orion, because he's also still calling him Orion at that point. It's you will address me by High Father. Light Ray is there, another character who is basically almost addressing the audience of them, like, like, hey, you will call your new High Father, like, we're gonna take our everything seriously here, like, don't just call him Orion even if he's brothers. So yeah, there's that tension between the two of them there. So and then Scott has a vision from Metron, who is another character, again, kind of over my head, but he had invented the boom tubes. He was kind of like neither. He didn't really have any alliances between New Genesis or Apocalypse. He was kind of like a neutral figure, but he has a vision from him, again, reiterating, you are not to know the face of God, another cryptic message. And then the next morning, Big Barda and Mr. Miracle are tasked with visiting Granny Goodness and almost kind of having a peace treaty in some ways, but they were ultimately kind of tasked with killing her. Orion High Father had said, we've got to get rid of Granny Goodness, so we're going to task you two to kill her because you know her best. So.
Sorry, it's hard to
no worries. Yeah,
out what you're saying.
No worries. But yeah. So they were going to Granny Goodness's camp, and they were tasked to kill her. So.
Right, and they basically tried tricking her, which it was so weird how, like, she embraced them when they got there and was like, "Oh, my kids," even though, like, they escaped from her.
Yeah, it's
that was like an interesting dynamic. And
yeah,
then I wanted to ask too, with the face of God stuff. Do you think, okay, in the very beginning when they showed the panels of, like, the kid and he's like, until now, do you think that was Scott as a kid, or is that just like a metaphor, or like a kid?
Yeah, I think it was a kid, but definitely in the arts they draw it as well, whether it was Scott or not, because I mean, like, he was raised in the X pit, so like it definitely wasn't him, like, like having an art class, but the character, the kid, it's a subtle thing, but like his T-shirt it's red and has like the kind of yellow like dots that the Mr. Miracle costume has. So like his T-shirt, whether it's a Mr. Miracle T-shirt or what, it's definitely kind of hinting at that. But yeah, like that was, again, yeah, like all these unanswered questions of are there connecting lines with that, or is it just something that we're seeing? So. But yeah, again, so we have Big Barda and Mr. Miracle.
Granny,
yes.
And it's.
Sorry, I think it cut off there. But Granny Goodness, they're in her tent, and yeah, like it's this weird kind of like almost abusive relationship of, or almost like her gaslighting them. Of she's treating them well during this, but we obviously know growing up, they were like tortured by her, but she still refers to them as has like a very like warm embrace during at the start of all this, which was kind of interesting to see. But they talk about the past, and Mr. Miracle, when they sneak into her tent at night, Big Barda is knocked out, and Granny Goodness kind of explains to Mr. Miracle that Orion had killed 250 troops. Or no, I'm sorry. That Highfather was like looking to have Mr. Miracle killed off. That's why he was sent over there. Like Orion was hoping that Granny Goodness and her troops would have killed him, but she had, since she raised them, like she was hesitant to do so. So like she kind of like was trying to like give him a warning, but Big Barda doesn't really care much for the warning and ends up doing in Granny Goodness, which was kind of a shocking scene, kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah, it was vicious. Like, even though that's where the art really got to me, because like she clearly killed her, but like it wasn't like a clear image. It was kind of weird, but yeah, she like slits her throat. It's pretty vicious.
Yeah, and kind of like bashes her in a bit too. Yeah.
What was that? Oh yeah, she did. She beat the face. You're right.
But yeah, since they did it at night, yeah, like they obscured it, and yeah, like you said, like we don't really see what happened, but we do see it later. But yeah, at the start here, like it's kind of rough and seemingly out of nowhere after this almost tender moments between Granny Goodness and Mr. Miracle of her trying to like give him a warning and try and save him to some degree.
Yeah, it's an odd dynamic. and then you went like she kind of implied that she knew they were there to kill her, which is why she was able to stop Arda initially. But so weird, and then and that's the end of chapter 2, right?
They revealed the plot of that who's meant to be killed. But then she also reiterates one more thing, was the reiteration of the prophecy that Darkseid would be killed, can only be killed by his own son. And Mr. Miracle mentions, well, Darkseid's son was Orion, like during the swap. And, before she's off, Granny Goodness, kind of plants the seed of doubt of is he, his son? It kind of gets into almost like nature versus nurture here of, sure, he's the biological son, but what's his name? Scott Free was the one that was actually raised by, in Darkseid's apocalypse. So does he have more of the claim of being the son? So as far as this prophecy goes, we get kind of the seed of doubt planted as to who will be the one to actually fulfill that.
Yeah, and that is surprisingly one of the questions we actually get answered.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm very excited about that one.
There are answers. Don't worry. But that's the end of chapter 2, and then 3.
That's the prophecy.
Yeah, 3 opens up again with we see in the background the deceased Granny Goodness, but the dialogue that's overlaid with it, I don't know if you remember, it was kind of a grim Holocaust story, but it was, I don't know, the way it was told, it felt almost like a weird joke to me, the way in which it's like the setup and almost like a punchline to it too. But yeah, like as Scott is recounting this grim Holocaust story, we see in the background Orion is decapitating Granny Goodness, and it's kind of graphic because it lasts like three pages of him like cutting off her head, to which Mr. Miracle is eventually sent back home on Earth as kind of taking leave from the war.
Right. So did you also notice, I thought this was kind of cool and a nice touch, like the beginning and end of each chapter kind of had this like TV narrator element where it was like, and the next like issue of Mr. Miracle,
exactly,
we will explore this, and that was such like an old school comic feel to it. I enjoyed that part.
Yeah,
of it.
because I think it was our boy Funky Flashman, because it's very much that almost Marvel style of the recap or synopsis, or like kind of like lead into we have to tune in next time to find out. So yeah, there's definitely like he's like the hype man of Mr. Miracle, kind of like giving the lead in with all that stuff. But yeah, and then when he's back home, Mr. Miracle is visited by the Forager, a character who is, I guess, the leader of the bug folk on New Genesis. And he's there kind of voicing concerns because during all this war, the bug people are basically being used as almost cannon fodder. He mentions that like at this point in the war, 6.5 million bugs had died. And he's saying like he's not really going to keep putting up with this. Like he'll no longer follow Orion, but he's willing to follow Scott, because like Scott as a general was actually he took care of the bug people, and like he wasn't just treating them as this cannon fodder. So he's there kind of professing his
they actually I think they say that
yes.
So I think they say that he the least amount of bugs died.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One still died. He's like, but the least amount died.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna follow you.
Yeah, which is a pretty interesting way of phrasing it. But he can actually see like within Mr. Miracle that there was actually some kind of care taken, or it wasn't just treating them as cannon fodder, as he says. But this meeting is pretty promptly interrupted by Light Ray, who takes a boom tube right there and kind of hunted down the Forager, saying that he's basically committing treason, that he was warned of this, and as such, he pays the cost. And right in the middle of Mr. Miracle's apartment living room, the Forager is just slaughtered. He's just shot down. So, I can't. I see them out talking, but it's not working. I don't know. Johnny, can you hear me now?
Sorry, did you hear what I said? Did you?
No, yeah, I saw you raise your hand and you were talking, but I didn't.
Did you hear what I said or no?
No, I missed it. Oh no. No, I didn't hear it.
As you were talking about the bug people dying, I killed a bug.
Oh.
There was a fly, and I like whacked it, and like you were like, and he killed like 6,000
Exactly, yeah,
bugs.
Oh no.
That was just fun.
Um,
But yeah, sorry, it's really the glitchiness. I know.
yeah, I was gonna say we might maybe have to put this on hiatus because I think like we may as well put it on hold for now if that makes sense to you, Johnny. Talking about the glitching as it happens. Yeah, let me know when you can hear me, Johnny, because I think we might have to put this on hold for now. I'm not sure what the deal is with the connection, but yeah, if the connection's not really going to be working, I think we could probably put this off for maybe another day. Johnny, let me know if when it finally comes in for you.
I missed all of that.
Oh, there we go. No worries. Real quick, I was just going to say, I think we'll call it here for now. Yeah, if the glitching is kind of going to be this rough, I apologize for it. We'll try to have this out. If not tomorrow, we'll see what days work. A real quick thing, too, for those who are subscribers or in the area, the mall will be open again on Friday. We'll have more information on Facebook. I'll shoot out an email to subscribers hopefully soon, too, with more information as we kind of get that finalized. But so we will be kind of doing back to business as usual to some degree. So for those who are in the area, you can come on by and say hi, and also pick stuff up in the store too. But for now, I think we'll call this one here for now a little short. Again, we apologize for the weird, I'm not sure, like this is the first time it's ever happened like this, so I don't know what the internet problem is, but we'll hopefully have that fixed next time. And we can kind of pick up where we left off talking about Mr. Miracle. So for today, I'll say goodbye. Thanks for stopping by, and we will see you hopefully later in the week with the rest of our talk about Mr. Miracle. So thanks.